Hello friends and subscribers, welcome back to Daniel's Tech World here on YouTube. My name is Daniel Rosell. Today's video is not featuring me in video format, just my voice, and going to be talking about using LLMs for software recommendations, using AI for software recommendations, just some tips on prompting for this use case because it's really helpful. I find personally that searching for software on SERPs, on regular search engines has gotten considerably less reliable over the years with all the efforts towards affiliate marketing and other practices that tend to just kind of throw up really a lot of bad recommendations. And ironically, a lot of people are shifting back to just, asking friends and colleagues for what they use for a certain thing. And I think that LLMs actually have a lot to offer in this respect because of the fact that you can fit in a lot of information, and we're going to talk about that today. So why use large language models for stock research in the first place? Well, I just kind of touched on the basics there, but probably the main one on the left here is that you can be highly descriptive in stating your requirements, and we'll look later at the question in context and how that can work in hand with that. And as you increase in your specificity, you can spend less time wading through bad fits. So this is really, I would think, about prompt engineering and formulating your prompts carefully. It's kind of like front loading the pain and hoping that the pain involved in doing that is going to be still less time consuming than the opposite of finding a bunch of not great fits on Google, going through them, subscribing for trials and finding that, oh wait, this does not do what I needed to do. This is not a useful tool for our specific purpose. So not that, working on prompts is the worst by any means. It's actually kind of fun. But you can think of it like putting your effort into the start of the search process instead of the end of it. So it's kind of actually pretty cool when you think about it. It's really kind of flipping the process of searching on its head. That goes for prompting in general, but especially when you're using it for searching for information. Another advantage is sometimes, this is my theory, it's not 100% validated, that the training data may be more selective. Sometimes the stuff that makes it into search engines, if it's really low quality, just isn't included in training data, and therefore you'll find that the results are better. But the disadvantage of using LLMs for stack research and for finding software is really comes down simply to the currency of information. Especially stuff like pricing is very fast moving, and here search engines, the traditional method of indexing content and making it available for users, has the upper hand because it can do that process very, very quickly and you'll get up-to-date info. Really, there aren't that many tips in this video, or I would say that I have honestly about prompting in general. The main one that I will probably keep coming back to in videos is be extremely detailed in your prompt writing. So a lot of people think that you have to be incredibly tight in the way that you word your prompts. And it's not necessarily the case. We'll look later at the question of context. It is a trade-off in terms of if you add more detail to your prompts, you do run into some risks and there are some disadvantages. But you do, in the case of this prompting strategy, looking for stack research, which I think can be very effective, there's actually a lot to be gained by putting more detail into your prompts in order to get much more relevant targeted results than you might be able to get just typing searches into a search engine. Like you search for best small business CRM, and that really doesn't specify very much in a sea of CRMs. That could set you down a really, really long evaluation process. So the trade-off is, this is my view of it. Of course, really everything in this video is kind of my view of how this works. There are pros and there are cons as prompt length increases. So what's the main advantage of a small prompt? Well, it's less effort to write, firstly, right? You can just type it in casually and you don't have to worry about sort of prompt engineering and editing, and it's just less of a process. And you also have a lower chance of conflicting instructions, which I don't mean it's kind of like saying I'm looking for a free CRM that is the best CRM in the world. You have to be realistic, obviously, just as you would if you're searching. I mean more stuff like you unintentionally conflict with your own instructions, like I need something that has voice support, then you change your mind halfway through. Maybe I don't need it, and you don't edit that prompt. then the CRM is going to get confused because it's trying to follow your logic, and the logic might be changing as you write it. Other ways that you can do that. The disadvantage is, if you do a shallow prompt, let's say a 50-word prompt, there's going to be a lot less context in it. And if you're doing stuff like Stack Research, there probably won't be stuff, even if you do have something like a RAG system going, or some kind of advanced method for setting context. This might not be actually something that, it's really kind of a once-off process. The advantages of writing longer prompts, and this is why I have the little green arrow here, because I think it's a mega advantage for this use case, is that you can put more context into the prompt and guide the large language model much more deterministically in finding what you're looking for. Other disadvantages, if you're doing this programmatically, which probably you wouldn't be for this type of prompting, but the longer your prompt, the more tokens, the more API costs if you're prompting like that. The context window is a bigger one, I would say, but as we're going to see, I don't think for this type of work it's really an issue. I think I'll do a separate video on long prompts because I see it being discussed a lot actually these days, and there's a little bit of research that I've dug up, not just what I'm about to show, but other interesting papers out there too, trying to answer this question. But as with everything in large language models, it's in such a state of flux that what is the case today may not be the case in a year. So I'm almost reluctant to make it for that reason, because this information becomes outdated in this area so quickly. The other disadvantage, as I've already mentioned, is that you've got a higher chance of what I call conflicts, conflicting instructions, hypocrisies in your prompt unintentionally. So regarding the long prompt question, there is some research that has been done into it. This is one that I came across from a few months ago, the summer, I think, approximately, and this shows quite an interesting graph. It's from a paper by 3 authors at the Allen Institute for AI and Bar-Ilan University in Israel, and we see here some interesting selection of models actually, and using chain of thought reasoning and just using regular prompting strategies, and how that kind of affected. We actually see quite interestingly for the GPT-4 curve, the very top line, which is chain of thought and GPT-4, quite a flat curve all the way down, quite a flat line, I should say, all the way down to 3,000 tokens, which would be a very, very long prompt to write, if you're looking for software. So that's GPT-4. And we can see the other models used in the evaluation, which were GPT 3.5, Gemini Pro, Mistral, and Mixtral. So really quite an interesting choice. There is a drop-off, and actually a steeper drop-off for those models, which I think the conclusion I would take from this, among others, is that it supports the idea that as models are getting more sophisticated and more advanced, their ability to handle longer prompts, more tokens in the input, without the inference, the output dramatically dropping off, is actually improving. So I think this is an optimistic graph, and it also shows that some following prompt engineering techniques actually does make a demonstrable difference to outputs. So this is a really interesting one, I think. And as the new models, the O1 series from OpenAI, gets evaluated in papers like this, we'll see more data points about how the evolution of models is actually affecting this question. So, I just dropped in a Stack Research prompt, as I call it, for a voice-to-text app that actually was kind of towards the longer end of what I would write into a token calculator. And for GPT-4, I got to 200 tokens, which if you just pop back to this graph and think about where 200 is, right? It's actually at the very, very start. So that's why I say that when you're talking about long prompts and is it going to really, really throw the model off, my contention is it doesn't seem like the actual length is going to, for a powerful, capable, modern large language model like GPT-4 and those coming after it, it doesn't seem like just throwing in a few hundred words is going to, I don't know if this is a common thing, but I do see people, and I've certainly thought, well, I was even 300 words pushing it. And I suggest my interpretation, at least of the research, is that that's not the case. So I would say that if you're trying to find software using a large language model, there is really a lot to be gained by going up to, like, let's say the 500 word limit, where we don't see with GPT-4 at least a prodigious drop off, not a vastly significant drop off. And the disadvantage of not doing that is really kind of, you're not making the most out of this technology at all, I would say. So I think that my contention would be that prompt engineering is actually much more of a determinant, and I use that term loosely to mean really prompt formulation more accurately, because stuff like adding, as I said, conflicts in your conflicting instructions. So do's and don'ts for this use case: be as detailed as possible. And this is something that I've just learned through trial and error personally, because I've done a lot of prompting like this, is to very clearly distinguish between what you need and what you would like. And I find that when you do that, you get vastly better results from this kind of prompt, which can actually really be very effective when it works for finding software. So because LLMs are such logical animals, are so good at following logic, I like to actually use markdown headers and say, this is the must-haves, all the things that you find must have these features, and these are the things that I would ideally like, but I know that we don't live in a perfect world and nobody may have actually made the software that ticks all my boxes. Specifying the budget as well, and try not to be redundant, or, as I've mentioned a few times now, provide conflicting instructions. This is just an example of how you can structure a prompt looking for software that can actually really squeeze a huge amount of information into 500 words, which, if we're taking a tokenization of 0.75, not get us really too far in terms of using up a lot of output context. That leaves us with a lot of room for recommendations, and it leaves us with a good amount of room to input information. And this is just an example of how you could structure such a prompt. I like to do a task statement, be very clear you're doing this, then list my requirements. And as I've said here, I find it very helpful to do that in a kind of hierarchical statement. This it must have, these would be great, and these are like my kind of cherry on the cake features that if it had this, brilliant, but if not, don't sweat it. An example is always so helpful, that in prompts that I just always feel naturally, that it's good to include one-shot prompting at least. So I've allocated 50 words in my hypothetical word budget for that. And then because we're looking at stock research finances, especially for more big ticket enterprise, stock evaluations, that kind of thing, you can provide clear parameters there as well. So just for 500 words, we packed in a huge amount to that we couldn't do in a search. And just an example of how this might work out in reality for something that I'm looking for personally. I'm doing a lot of voice dictation at the moment, or I've discovered it, and I would actually really love to sort of shift my day-to-day way of using computers totally in the direction of voice control and voice typing. So even though I found a couple of great tools, I'm still just looking at a couple of other ones. Always nice to have backups too. So yeah, this is just your requirements here. You're telling the LLM your usage context, and you can actually even format your prompt in a non-textual manner. You could have this could be a CSV that you just take out of a template you save as a Google Doc, as a Google Sheet, let's say, just for example. And you could just actually prompt, I do this sometimes. The prompt is follow the instructions in the file. Then you drop in the file with the actual prompt. This is, of course, using a web UI drag and drop, but just to say that you can think a bit out of the box in terms of how you even provide the prompts to the models. That this actually works as well as just doing it all textually. Then the tech specs, for me, because I'm a Linux user, as I probably mentioned in most of these videos, it's just such a common cause of a suggestion being a non-runner that I will put that in. But any other kind of weird compatibility issues you might have, and then the output instruction, which really I find very useful in general in dialing in the, not only can you really provide a lot of clarity in your instructions, you can also tell it to follow an exact format. The other thing you can do, this is kind of, I would say, a bit of a more almost advanced strategy, but it does work, and it is fun if you really want to explore the kind of range of stuff that these models can do. It's quite cool, actually, is you can actually come up with your own little evaluation system. and provide a weighting system, a weighting score to the model. Tell it you're looking for a CRM. Just for example, something I don't know, I feel like that's just a classic business tech thing that people need. We need a CRM or a project management tool or something like that, right? Very common thing that people are looking for, and there's always way too many of them on the market, and undoubtedly people will keep saying we have a new AI powered CRM and no, our one's better, and you know, there'll always be a glut probably of SaaS tools out there. So you can use if you're very, very dialed in on what you need from it, you can use a little evaluation matrix and a little scoring system to really kind of play around with what these things can do, especially the models with good reasoning capability. So the difference between a casual prompt and a sort of more engineered prompt can be quite significant when you actually sort of get the outputs. You know, this is just something you might just like type in on your phone or dictate very quickly. Yeah, kind of looking for a voice to text thingy for Chrome. I don't know, it does speech stuff, and okay, you'll get something. But you've provided a lot less guidance. And actually, after these two, it gave me a lot of just kind of transcription tools for voice meetings, and that just wasn't so helpful. This might look like it's a huge amount to provide, but it's just something that I dictated, then I cleaned up with a large language model, being way, way more specific on what I'm looking for, telling it I want 3 recommendations. Don't give me 20 mediocre ones, find 3 good things. I'm looking for good accuracy. I need it to be able to do text input into any field, so don't recommend Google Docs' own voice typing thingy. I'm not looking for a transcription tool. So there's both negatives and positives here in this prompt, right? Sometimes if you do a casual prompt, you'll see that the model is going in a totally unhelpful direction, and you'll say, okay, I need to tell it that I'm looking for A and not B. Budget, consumer budget for me as a person. And then also this is, I find, a good strategy as well. I didn't actually really do it here, but I find you might say I'm really looking for something that uses this under the hood, and a justification. Then, so you'll get a matrix type output based on the how you do the formatting instruction. And I actually find this very helpful because let's say this isn't the part of the output that was most helpful to me, just what I put in the screenshot here. But if, the underlying speech recognition technology is so important that I actually was able to format the prompt in a way that once I have that in, I'm like, okay, this is unlikely to be a step up from what I'm using now, voice in, but at least I know that in advance. I don't need to waste time evaluating it because I know what it's running on, and it's probably going to give very comparable accuracy. And again, this is all just coming from the formatting instruction. This is using O1 preview, by the way, as the model. And it basically, no matter what you're looking for, doing this kind of more structured prompting will probably get you much better outputs. Hope this was useful. Just a guide. It was a bit longer than I intended, but hopefully got some good info in there. If you're using large language models for evaluating software or any really structured evaluation process you're going through, you can use very decisive, deterministic prompting, detailed prompting to get much better outputs, and you don't need to keep them to 1 or 2 sentences is the other takeaway I would say. Thanks for watching today's video. Until the next one, subscribe for more.